What is a home, really? The word itself is very simple, a very humble word. It doesn't have a certain cadence to it or very flourishy. Kind of doesn't have it. It's not very pretentious. It's very humble, but it's also a word that captures a complex array of connotations, emotions, and images. It is, I guess, at its most basic level, the place where the family dwells together. And these individuals are the ones with whom we have the strongest bonds, the ones who raise us, the ones we live with. And it's a place of security. Every nook and cranny is familiar, and each space has a purpose, one in which you sleep, another in which you eat, a third to play and learn, and so on. And then, of course, memories of the fundamental life experiences that we all grow into and experience can be found there and attached to that location. Not often too many to be counted. And as we grow up and we are away for periods of time from that home, it becomes a source of comfort and longing. It's a place where we can go back into our memories and find comfort, to rest in and to look forward to on our way back. As we go out, we always come back in. Because the world can often be a place of unknowns, dangers, and perhaps also adventure and excitement, so good and bad. But it is always the home to which we return. It is, in a very real sense, the center of our world. King David desires to have that center for his people. He wishes to build a home for God. Of course, for God himself, a physical place isn't necessary. All of creation is God's. He is present in everything and everywhere. But in a real sense, this temple is more for the Israelite people, because the temple becomes the place that puts the heart of the Israel nation, the city of Jerusalem, the seat of their king, into close contact with the Lord. And it is the focus of their approach and their relationship with God, the way they are able to express the bonds that they have forged with God that through the covenant. The temple, then, is the ultimate expression of that covenant. However, it seems like this would be an easy win for David, right? This is a good thing. He wants to do something great for God. But in response, God instead says that he himself will establish a house. In this case, we can often read, when we hear a house, we think of a dynasty, a family line. And he will establish that house for David. And that he promises that this house, this dynasty, will not fail. And that eventually God will raise up a descendant who will inherit that kingdom, whom God will be like a son to him, and that kingdom will never fail. And so, what was at once a moment for David to express his love and generosity to God becomes a moment in which God bestows further blessings and gifts upon David and the people of Israel. And it's a wonderful thing to reflect on, that God often is trying to bestow more upon us. His love and his generosity is always desiring to be expressed. And this, on the one hand, we have the kind of surface level reading of this promise, which is already a wonderful thing, an eternal kingdom. No other pagan ruler can say that his God has promised him this. And no other pagan ruler can say that his God can, if he did, would be able to make that happen. But it is more than just a kingdom with a king and people like we think of. It's not a mere structure, and it's not a simple political arrangement. This house will embody all the shades of meaning that I mentioned that a home was before, and more. The temple that David's successor Solomon eventually builds will contain God's glory and presence. But the house of God will contain that and much more, and will be with us forever, even as the temple, as we see later in the history of the Jewish people, eventually crumbles. Because God's dwelling will not be dead stones like the temple, as glorious, as magnificent as those stones are when they're arranged into a structure like that. Instead, God will create for himself a living temple. And that, in a special way, is expressed in the Blessed Virgin Mary. She, a descendant of David's line, and the child she is promised by Gabriel will be the one that God said would be like a son to him, the one who would inherit that house and that dynasty. And that child, that God who is our Lord Jesus Christ, makes his home within her womb, taking on our flesh and the nature of the human race. When this child is born, God will then make a home for us in a way that is beyond a nation or a temple or even our own families. United to us through the incarnation, he dwells in each one of us, just as we are all incorporated into him and his life and the life of the Trinity. Often, we can say, it's often said that home is where the heart is. And this is precisely what's happening. Previously, the home is a physical location and limited to a certain group of people. Now, our home is Christ, who we carry with us. The world is no longer totally foreign and dangerous. It is a place that is now restored back to that primeval Garden of Eden, the place where is the home of all of us. When we face danger and adversity, we bring Christ with us into those moments, and we have no need to fear. This was the courage and the dwelling that gave the martyrs the courage to go to their deaths joyfully, and gave the saints the ability to suffer without losing their peace and love, because they never left their home. They never left that place of security because God is with them. Each one of us then becomes a temple for God, infinitely more precious than the temple of Jerusalem, because each of us is a creation of God that is capable of love and who is made in his image and likeness, a spark of divinity. There can be no better home for our Lord, no better tabernacle. Each of us also makes up a piece of that renewed kingdom that was promised to David, united to Jesus the King and to each other through the spiritual bonds of baptism and God's grace. All of this is made possible in and through the incarnation. And so soon, this afternoon, for some of you perhaps, we will greet the newborn king to David, who was promised. But more than that, we will greet the one who will settle in us our final homeland, and that we will experience the peace and joy that will never end or diminish.